Mary Cate Delvey, it's so great to meet you virtually, and thank you
Yeah,
so much for coming on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Megan. I'm happy to be here.
Um, I love your videos. I think everybody loves your videos. People keep sending them to me. They're
That's awesome.
hilarious. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because what you realize is that you don't even need to do satire with the whole trans phenomenon. As you've shown everyone, all you really need to do is listen to the trans.
It writes itself, it really does.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about yourself. Who are you? What's your background?
So my background is actually I'm an exotic animal vet tech. So
Oh my God,
right now,
really?
yeah,
That's
I'm not
awesome.
working in a clinic anymore. I'm doing working with a wildlife rehab group. So sometimes I'm up in their clinic. I'm getting ready to get my own licensing, and so I'm going to have my next round of weird foster animals in my house. Got to release a nighthawk a couple of nights ago, which was really cool. Um, but before that, I was a bartender. So I've had kind of a very varied, actual work background. And then, I'm a mom and I have a house full of strange animals all the time.
This sounds like the dream, man. Like, or, maybe the dream when I was 11 or something
Yeah,
like that.
childhood me is very happy. I was that kid, like always out catching lizards and stuff and bringing it in. And my mom would be like, get that out of here, And I'd be like, oh, look at it. It's really cute. So I am very pleased with where I'm at.
How did you get into that area of work?
I was initially on the track to be a paramedic and went for a ride along and was just horrified and saw some things. They said it was actually a very busy day for them, in terms of actual things happening, but I realized, oh, I can't do that. So I just kind of poop into the animal track. Um, and that's worked out a lot better.
Interesting. What did you see that turned you off?
Brains.
I shouldn't laugh. It's terrible,
I
actually.
know. No, it was really bad.
Yeah, I can only imagine the kinds of like disgusting things that you would see in that kind of situation. Okay, so sorry, I wasn't planning on talking about all this, but I'm genuinely very interesting. So what kind of animals do you have in your house right now?
So right now I just have all my pets. I Saturday morning I am going to go get my next round of whatever it is. It just depends on what is coming through the clinic. So since I have bird tube feeding skills and I can do kind of the heavier medicine at home, hopefully they will be giving me things that either need shots or need tube feeding. But last year I had a couple of litters of baby possums, which was a lot of fun. Usually I'll have a tortoise here. I haven't had a tortoise for months, which is very sad for me because I got used to just having one around. Um, but also I would love to have birds. Not I don't want loud birds. I want like night birds, not tropical birds, but pigeons are good. I've had a pigeon here and there. And those are my favorite birds. They're very dumb and I love them a lot. But right now
Um,
in my house, I've got two dogs, four cats, and then my ferrets, which is just always a revolving door of old janky ferrets.
what's like the weirdest animal that you've ever had in your house?
In my house, um, probably just macaws in my house, which was there was a fire at the clinic I was working at the time. So I had nine birds in my house after that for a little bit. And then for a few weeks until they could either go back into the temporary premises hospitals or back home where they were supposed to be. But I haven't had anything super exotic in my house yet, which I would like to. But the wildlife here. You said you're down in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
In
I
the
don't know how
jungle.
similar. Yeah, probably similar to Florida wildlife. We get. Lizards, snakes, tortoises, turtles, tons of different birds, a lot of deer, raccoons, possums. Trying to think. I won't do squirrels. I refuse to have squirrels in my house because when they
Why?
get out, I can't catch them. They're impossible and they bite really bad. Skunks are they're interesting. I probably won't do skunks in my house either for obvious reasons, but
Fair. So squirrels
yeah,
bite, hey?
they bite bad. Yeah, I don't like them.
That's interesting because I mean, I think that people should assume that a squirrel might bite you, but then there's recently been videos that I've seen on Instagram of these guys
Hmm.
who've like adopted and they have like a
Oh
squirrel
yeah,
pet. And I'm like,
yeah.
okay, I mean, how have you domesticated this squirrel? And I suspect it's probably convincing a lot of people that they should also have a squirrel pet, which is maybe a bad idea.
A lot of people will find them as babies and then they raise them in the house. And, at that point, they're a little bit more people trained, a little friendlier, but they're still squirrels. And I guess when I worked with the exotics, seeing a squirrel on the appointments list for the day, I just be like, all right, because they don't like anything you're trying to do to them when you're not their person. They don't want you to hold them down and open their mouth up or grind their teeth down. But, we'd have squirrels come in with screwed up teeth that would need, a little bit taken off of them. And man, if you lose your grip on them, it is not fun because they'll let you know how unhappy they are.
What kinds of other animals have bitten you?
Worst bite ever was from a skunk. One time, a Moluccan cockatoo split my lip open. I was pretty close to like, do I need to go get stitches? Um, let's see. The reptiles haven't bitten me. They've been very good. I've worked with some very cool reptiles, but luckily haven't been bit by like a monitor or anything like that. Haven't been bit by a snake either, but birds bite. They bite a lot. So when I was working regularly up there, I just was constantly covered in scratches and bites of all sorts. You get used to it after a while. I felt like my job was go get this thing out of its cage without it biting you.
My challenge for the day.
Yeah.
What about like, so you've never been bitten by a poisonous snake or anything like that?
No, luckily. I've treated other animals that have been bitten by rattlesnakes, things like that. And, it's hilarious when they get all swelled up, 4 or 5 times their size. And you're like, now, did we learn our lesson, not to go after that snake? But nope, luckily, I have not been bitten by anything like that, which I haven't seen venomous things come through the rehab. I'll have to ask them what would they do if someone brought in a venomous snake because I don't actually no one's ever picked one up and brought it in that I've seen.
Like this rattlesnake wasn't looking so hot, so I thought I'd bring him by.
It's something I would do, but I haven't seen it happen.
Okay. We can move on from the exotic animal things. I could probably
Okay,
talk to you about that for the rest of the
I know it's my
conversation. I'm very
favorite.
interested in animals. Yeah, I like it. Um, so, your other job, of course, besides trying to avoid getting bitten by squirrels, is exposing how really quite not just insane, but terrifying a lot of these so-called trans women are.
Yeah.
How did you get, how did you fall down this terrifying rabbit hole?
So like from the very beginning.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So before COVID, I was a bartender. And then during COVID, you ever heard that thing like who you were during COVID is who you really are?
Uh-huh. Hmm.
So I
I
saw
ran
that and was
away to
like,
Mexico.
I hope that's not true because relapsed back into an eating disorder. I was just chain smoking and hula hooping all the time and then got kind of manic. And I convinced my husband at the time, we're going to make porn. Like we're gonna do feminist porn. We're gonna do like black and white vampire period porn, and
No,
I was very
no.
excited about it. I know,
If
I
I was
know.
your friend and you were telling me this, I would have been like, no,
So
no.
that's exactly what happened. And I got turned on to Andrea Dworkin and found her whole archive online and was like, oh, just kind of that waking up from liberalism, of, oh, this isn't the empowerment. This is very harmful. Like I really fell down the radical feminist rabbit hole so fast. It was like a 180, whiplash where I'm sure my husband at the time was like, I thought we were making vampire porn, but, and then I'm like
Nope,
lecturing
all sex is
him,
rape. Sorry.
yeah, 100%. So, so that happened. At that point, it was J.K. Rowling was starting to be more public about her stance on the trans issue. Another funny thing that led into it was I I had on oh gosh, what is it, my Twitter or something, had been using the black and orange squares. I kept seeing people using those and I thought that was like code for Pornhub because that's the colors, but it was the super straight flag. And then, so I started getting followed by a lot of people who were already in the anti-trans movement, who at the time it was like, well, if you get a flag, then my flag is super straight. I don't date trans people. And so I think my algorithm started feeding me a lot more, of this one specific issue. And then in 2022, I wanted to meet other radical feminists, not this rainbows and glitter, selfish, liberal feminism, like true feminism. So I went to the Women's Declaration conference that they were having, which was reigniting the women's movement. And I still pull out my notebook sometimes. I tried to take notes about everything. Like I just really, really enjoyed it, listening to women who had been through second wave feminism, who, they were talking about how to, I don't know, do on the ground, boots on the ground conversations. And I just felt very okay. At that point, I still didn't feel like I knew enough to be as loquacious about it as I am now. Um, but I had started cataloging things that they said, and I was going over to Reddit and seeing quotes on Twitter, things like that. I had a personal account at the time that later got banned, pre Elon. But I remember trying to wake up my friends and family. And so at this point, I have just like a file folder in my cloud of screenshots of things. And, they'd say, oh, well, I don't see why it's that bad. Just, the usual, let people do what they want, blah, blah, blah. And I'd be sending them, 108 screenshots. And my account ended up getting banned for something unrelated. I had said abortion's a women's issue. And that was a no-no because they wanted to be included, of course, but the men did. So I had my old account and I was like, oh, I will just revive this, and decided at that point, like, what? Okay, we as women, as gender critical women, get banned all the time for critiquing them. We don't threaten them. We're not being as gross as they are, but they're allowed to say whatever they want. And, especially on websites like Reddit, they're allowed to have dyke conversion, all of these rape subreddits. The trannies brigaded and they had the pregnancy subreddit taken down. They had the gender critical subreddit taken down. And I was like, how are they allowed to say anything they want, but women are not? So and I think it was February of that year, I just decided I was going to read them out loud with no commentary. I'm just going to sit down, and I tried to put them into categories, like one talking about how they're trying to express their own breast milk and drink it, like just, and it's all gross. My phone is an absolute cesspool now of screenshots. I always, I don't let my kids touch my phone anymore. Um, but that seemed to be successful, and I wasn't getting accounts banned. And people, I think, were rightly horrified, because if you're not hearing the things that they say to each other when they think no one else is around, when they think no one else is listening, I think for people who are unaware, it's easy for them to go, oh, well, they're just, oh, well, they're just harmless gays, or, they really
Just
have,
let them
people
live their
have,
lives. They just want to exist.
right, right, exist. But people have no idea how violent and disgusting and, just it's fatal porn addiction, It's they get so into this fetish, then they realize they'll never be the object of their desire, and that's why they have a lower life expectancy rate. So it's just wild. And I often kind of feel like Alex Jones in my life, where I'm like, because I know things, I know things, but when you know things and other people don't know things, they look at you and they think you're crazy, or whatever it is he said. But I heard him rant about that, and I was like, I hear you, Alex Jones, and I feel all the time.
Yeah, for real, because you tell people what you find and they probably think you're at least exaggerating, if not lying, or
Right,
they think that
right.
you're probably just finding like this one anomaly. Like, oh, you
You're
just found
cherry
like this one. Yeah, you're
picking.
cherry picking the crazy people. But I
There's
mean,
bad apples in every bunch. But I've been doing this for I think we're just under 2 years. I have like 3 hours of material, and I tell people, I'm like, what you're hearing is gross. You have no idea how much I don't put in these videos because it's too gross. But because then nobody will listen to it. So it's absolutely not cherry picking. It's the rule, not the exception, is what I find.
okay, so when you say something's too gross that even you can't read it aloud or do like a response video, I mean, what's too gross?
uh, you know, Stories about them having like their weird polycule orgies with each other, the just it's all so gross. Some of them talking about, how do I clean my Hitachi wand after it's been 5 inches up my butt, just, I mean, it's really the stuff I have to sift through sometimes. I'm like,
Where are you finding most of this stuff?
Mostly Reddit. There is, and I try now to pull from the largest subreddits, because I feel like if you have a subreddit with 500,000 regular participants, you're a lot less likely to get accused of cherry picking. It's these are the mainstream ideas. These are the parts of their lifestyle, or whatever you want to call it, that they all relate to. So that's been a deliberate choice, has been the MTF subreddit. Um, Translator is a really fun one, but also the main trans page on there, I will pull from occasionally. Let's see, there have been some quotes, which Genevieve Gluck has pulled out of reading some of their books that are sprinkled into the Listen to Trans People series as well, which some of those are just lovely, things like the asshole is the universal vagina, and
Wild. Well, do you remember what the first video you ever did was?
yeah, the in terms of the Listen to Trans People videos.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Yeah, that one was them talking about children. So it was, let's see, a Lochvide Manon saying, little girls are kinky too. There's no such thing as innocent children. let's see, I think it was Grace Lavery in there too, also saying, echoing the same sentiment, saying, yeah, innocence is a myth, things like that, just talking about, because when we say we don't want your kink around our kids, normally their first instinct is to say, oh, we're not a kink, it's my true self. But some of them will just come right out and argue with you, basically just arguing for pedophilia. There is a group in Germany. I did a video for Redux about them where they were lobbying for the self ID laws for children as young as 5. And their reasoning for this, they were a pedophile group saying, well, if children can't identify a sexuality, then children can't consent to adult children's sexual relationships, which I don't know why they're given a platform and not thrown in jail, to be honest with you. But I, I think that the trans movement has been a vehicle for the worst types of men, is just kind of what it boils down to. Is it's the perfect way for them to go places and talk to people that they really shouldn't, that a sane society would say, no, you can't, read to children while you're dressed up like a sex clown. But they say the magic words, it's I'm trans, and then, oh, we don't want to be transphobic. We don't want to get canceled like J.K. Rowling, things like that. They've got a really good grip on the media. We see all the time, a woman rapes and murders her mother, and then you open the article and it's a guy. So it's so frustrating.
Yeah, it's always a man. It always turns out to be a man.
Always a man.
All the female pedophiles, the female, mass shooters, the female
Right.
rapists, serial killers.
Well, we did have was it Nashville? The Nashville shooter did turn out to be a female on testosterone. So,
Right.
Same movement, but we see the aggression happening with women who are given male hormones that they wouldn't women, that's a huge anomaly for a female to be a mass shooter. That almost, I don't think that would have happened if she wasn't in the trans movement.
Yeah, no, you just don't hear about those kinds of things. There was one video that you did. All of it is so revealing, it's hard to even choose, but there was one video that you did about this guy who was, sympathizing with Buffalo Bill.
Oh, yeah.
That one? Tell us about that one.
Absolutely. Yeah. So he was saying that, oh man, is it okay if I grab my iPad and see if I can pull that one up?
Yes, please.
Okay.
That's exactly the kind of thing that they would say, oh, no, that's not trans. That's not us. Because that's,
right.
That's what they said about that recent series that everyone was talking about, Monster. About the
Ed
serial
Gein.
killer that Psycho was based on. Yeah, Ed Gein.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, supposedly there's all sorts of different tellings of what his real story was. But in the series, anyway, he's a cross-dresser and he has a autogynephilia fetish and he likes to masturbate in his mother's clothing and underwear and, actually goes so far as to make a skin suit out of women's skin.
Yup. Well, and yeah, they're like, oh, he's not one of us, and they say that anytime one of them does something bad, they say, oh, he's not one of us. But God forbid you say someone's not actually, they say, oh, they are if they say they are. Anyone who says they are is a woman, So they're so inconsistent. All right. This is Renilla, and if you look through, I think Redux has done things on him, or maybe you search through Genevieve Gluck's backlog of horrors, because she had more information on him too. But he says, To this day, the most accurate portrayal of my own transgender psychosis I've ever seen was in Silence of the Lambs, when Buffalo Bill copes with being denied access to medical transitioning by skinning women alive and making a woman suit out of their flesh. That's how badly he wants to be seen as a woman. And he goes on talking about how throughout his childhood he would draw dismembered women and, just compulsively do this. And says he wraps it up with, it literally took decades for my transgender feelings to not manifest in genuinely dangerous ways. And I have at least 5 or 6 different videos where I've compiled the violence, the violent rhetoric that comes from them, where they say, women, or, they like to single out TERFs, but sometimes it's just quote unquote cis women in general, deserve to be raped by trans women, blah, 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 kill it. I'm sure you're familiar, and most of your listeners are familiar with turfisaslur.com. So yeah, I mean, it's just like that over and over and over and over. It's not a few bad apples, I guess, is my point.
Yeah. There was another video that you did about another guy who was fantasizing about torturing and killing girls and women, and then TERF specifically, because they say it outright, which is so crazy to me. Like it doesn't even occur to them to hide this stuff. It's so strange. I don't get that part. But he was based on the fact that like he couldn't really be female, and so he was so angry at real females that he was fantasizing about torturing and killing them, including kids.
Yeah, and that sentiment comes up in their forums over and over, is that they're angry when they see girls because they feel robbed of having a female childhood. They're angry when they see women because they don't look like us. It really boils down to, they don't like women. They hate women. And I think that's something that's hard for people who have not been immersed in this for a long time to understand, because they think to themselves, oh, well, they want to be women, so they must really like women. But it's so far the opposite. They don't see women as people. They see us as sex costumes and objects. Like these are men who are so far removed from loving women. They've deluded themselves in a lot of cases, but I think the reason they're comfortable saying those things again is because they're saying them mostly in these spaces where it's just one big tranny circle jerk. They say, oh, I'm not or I'm feeling like an imposter, and everyone comments, you're a beautiful girl. It's always girl, it's almost never woman. And they talk about, oh, well, I identify as a girl because I'm going through my second puberty. But I think a good chunk of them, they're not just they're dressing as what they want to have sexually, right? So it sets my red flags off, because they're dressing as little girls. That's what they view as their ideal sex object. I don't think any of them should be around kids. I really, really don't. But going back to Ed Gein, there is so much research that up until recently, everybody talked about. They taught in police academies and at FBI seminars that cross-dressing as a fetish was generally indicative of, like that was part of the profile for violent offenders. There are a lot of men who have been serial killers, violent rapists, serial rapists who had a cross-dressing fetish. But now it's very minimized, and they say, oh, we want to be sensitive to the trans community and all that, but it's putting women in danger to minimize that and to pretend like it's not an issue.
It's really the perfect ruse for predatory men.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they can come into any woman's space, and you call the cops, they'll say, oh, law's the law. The law says they're allowed to be there. He identifies as a woman. Like it's their magic word. That's all they have to say.
Would you say that most of these men who are identifying as trans women or women are kind of dangerous creeps and perverts? Like, is that the majority rule more so than the reverse of it being, yeah, a minority? And then, you know, there's the rest of them are just, I don't know, they don't like masculinity, or they have some kind of body dysmorphia, or they have some kind of brain problem where they think they're actually a woman on the inside,
Mhm.
yada, yada, yada.
I think it depends largely on the age cohort. I think a lot of the minors who get swept up into this, first of all, it's trendy, it's the thing to be. I don't want to be boring and a cishet white man. I'm going to be trans. They're brought up on anime. They have constant free access to porn. So I don't know that. I don't necessarily want to call children perverts, but at the same time, it does seem to be the majority of them will say, oh, I had my first orgasm masturbating in my mother's bra, or I used to steal my sister's skirts, and haha, she always wondered what happened to them. They start out young doing these things. But I think especially the adults that come into it, I think 100% it's a fetish. It's a cross-dressing perversion gone too far. They also pretty much across the board are into this thing called sissy hypnoporn, which is someone hypnotizing a man into behaving as a woman because it's to them it's dehumanizing. It's degrading, and that turns them on to the idea that that would be done to them, because then they can also feel like it's not their choice, you know? They can blame it on somebody else, I guess. But I think when it comes down to it, any man that is entering a woman's space has already committed a perverted act. If you're a man and you're going into a place where little girls are undressing, whether or not you're actively beating yourself off, that's a perverted thing to do. And it's like I said, I don't I don't know that classifying their intentions is helpful or not, because it's wrong no matter why they think they're doing it. Whether or not they truly believe that that their penis is a birth defect and that they truly are a woman, whether they really believe that or not, or whether they're using it as a way to get into women's bathrooms and sports and prisons. I think it's wrong no matter why they're doing it. And I also don't believe them anymore when they say, oh, well, not me. I'm not doing it for a fetish, because why would they admit that? They admit it to each other sometimes, or they'll I mean, every single day is three or four of the am I really trans or is this just a fetish post? So some part of them sometimes knows this or is questioning it, but the little echo chambers that they get into don't let them explore that further than that. There's something they like to post to each other that people can have a look at called the Transgender Bible, which is basically them explaining to each other that their fetish is a normal part of being trans. And in fact, it's a sign that they're trans and that it's all of our fault. We should normalize it. They're not really getting aroused. They're just so happy because they're finally able to express themselves the way they never have. And they say things like, your body just doesn't know how to process that happiness, so it gives you a boner. And it's like, my guy, come on.
Right. Yeah, there was a video that I was I was listening to it actually. You were talking about it elsewhere. And I think that they played the clip. It was a podcast I was listening to. About and the guy was talking about his euphoria boner.
Hmm. All the time. Yep. Gender euphoria. And I think this has come like, I feel like a broken record, but I'm like, I'm not going to jerk you off. I'm not going to give you your boner. I'm not going to call you by your pronouns. I'm not going to, just like, I'm not interested in participating in your sex act. And so I feel like when people say, well, just let them dress however they want, I've had a lot of pushback personally because my stance is more, they say, oh, well, do you want to criminalize men wearing women's clothes? And it's not that so much as, we have laws against public nudity, right? We have laws against someone being in a, a basically just like out in public in lingerie or other things that would arouse you. That's not publicly acceptable. And I think we kind of need to expand the view of that. If someone is wearing a skirt for the purpose of getting aroused in public, that's a problem. We should not all have to see that and participate in that. So it is hard, I guess, the line there between kink and quote unquote self-expression. But also they say they're gonna die if they have to wear pants. I think they'll be okay.
I mean, imagine if we said something like that. Like, can you imagine? It's like, okay, I'm a woman. So according to your ideology, I love femininity and I have to embrace femininity. And if I am not allowed to embrace femininity, then I'll die, then I actually just don't exist anymore. And, of course, I wear men's clothes all the time. Most of the clothes that I wear would technically probably qualify as unisex. I also wear feminine clothes sometimes, but it doesn't impact my view of myself. I mean, I don't really actually go around in my day-to-day life thinking, I'm a woman, I'm a woman, I'm a woman.
Look at my painted nails. Look how
I feel like a lady. I'm just thinking about other regular human things for the most part. I feel hungry, my shoulder hurts. Need a massage. But yeah, that's an interesting point because I remember, you probably remember this sort of debate or conflict, you could say, that happened around last year's Gen Spec conference when one of the, I can't remember his name now, but there's a man.
Is it Phil Illey?
Phil Illey, yeah, and he came to the conference and he was wearing a dress, and a lot of the women said that it made them feel uncomfortable, which is justifiable. And then at the same token, a lot of other women, a lot of the other gender criticals said, let him be here and, stop policing, or I'm totally paraphrasing. I shouldn't speak on their behalf, but there was a conflict around that.
I do remember that.
Yeah, and and I actually have said before, okay, whatever, wear whatever you want. But you're right that it shouldn't extend to, and I'm not talking about laws, I'm talking about social norms and shaming, really. Like,
right.
Not always a bad thing. There are plenty of things that can be shamed in society.
Bring back shame, please.
Yeah, including parading your fetishes around in public.
Right. And someone like Phil Illey, who is a self-admitted autogynephile, so him wearing a dress is a sex act for him, according to him. So I absolutely am on the side of the women who are made to feel uncomfortable by that.
I mean, I guess I could see it on both ends. But it is, it's sort of, I guess it's hard to know how to deal with it exactly. It just was never, I don't think it was ever something that we used to think about how to deal with, because, for example, people, the trans activists will say, well, what are you going to do? Like, do genital checks to make sure that trans women aren't coming into your washroom. And it's like, well, that you never had to do that before because it was not acceptable on a social level, never mind legally. Like if a man is doing something like going into the women's change room, that was illegal. You weren't allowed to, as a man, walk to the women or girls change room and take your dick out. That was a crime, a sex crime. And if a man tried to go into the women's washroom, he would maybe be kicked out by another man. It was acceptable to be like, get the fuck out of here,
Right. We have self-policing with social norms because there were consequences, and the trans movement has 100% removed consequences for breaching those boundaries. So, you've got the men who maybe are truly that insane that they've bought this hook, line, and sinker from childhood even, and they really believe they have a right to be there. But then you also have every awful man who goes, oh, that's how I get in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about how prominent a role pornography plays in all of this?
Yeah, I, from their own words, I feel like that is 100% the root cause of so much of this for these men. They start watching it very young. It becomes like any other addiction, like with a drug, where they need weirder and weirder things or more and more violent things. They'll say fairly often, I figured out I was trans because whenever I watched porn, I like to imagine myself as the woman. Um, and then they reason themselves out of it being a fetish, saying, well, of course you did, because you're a woman. But, it comes back again and again to exposure to porn, and then usually later on into the trans porn, which they're pushing hard on people. So, I think there was an explosion of people identifying as trans during the pandemic. And I really think that for so many men being home, usually alone, nobody monitoring their internet activity, they nothing better to do. They got deeper and deeper into the porn rabbit hole. They start finding weirder and weirder things. And the other thing that they'll say about a year into their transition is, it's no longer doing it for me. What's happening? And it's like, well, you are, this is end stage porn addiction, where you don't get erections anymore. It doesn't work anymore, because you have exhausted the chemical connection there.
Yeah.
But I think that the fact that it's being so normalized around kids too is looping them in younger and younger. I guess I don't have sons, but if I did, I don't think we'd own a computer.
Mhm.
I just, it's so hard to keep kids away from awareness of the trans issue. It's everywhere. It's in their games, it's on Pinterest, it's in their schools, depending on where you live. It's in their friend groups and on all their shows. They had a revival of the Babysitters Club, and there's a boy who thinks he's a girl in the Babysitters Club, which I took that personally because I loved those books growing up. But
I know, me too.
and
I
I
had
think,
a babysitter's club when I was a kid. We started
did
our
you?
own
That's
babysitter's
so
club. Yeah.
cute. Oh, yeah, I think, and I think it's a big reason why you see a lot of middle-aged men identifying as trans, is because they have reached their midlife crisis, and what they do is consume copious amounts of porn. And that, I think, is visible in the way that they portray their version of a woman, right? You were saying, most of your clothes are pretty androgynous. I wear jeans and a t-shirt 9 out of 10 days. It's we don't go around wearing fishnets and thigh highs and teeny tiny, barely covers your butt skirts
And
and,
like
big old
frilly
pushed up boobies. Like,
dresses.
right. Their version of what a woman is so obviously colored by the fact that they're watching so much porn. They shop. If you go and you read some of their threads about, I can't find shoes that fit me, I can almost guarantee you the top suggestion on there every single time is the stripper shoes website, which women don't wear. That's what strippers wear, not your everyday woman. Whenever they get their like plastic silicone breast forms that they wear. Have you seen these? It's like a shirt that they wear, like a skin suit.
Mhm.
I mean, the comically large pornographic breasts, and then they wear shirts so that the fake nipple shows. Like, it's, to me, it's so obvious what this is. I find it frustrating trying to talk to people who can't see it, which I think is why I've leaned more into, I'm just going to make fun of you, because I there's no reasoning with some of them, and some of their supporters too. It's a religion at this point.
Yeah, I mean, liberal women will be offended if you tell them something like this. It doesn't matter that it's
Right,
true. It doesn't matter that it's dangerous. It doesn't
right,
matter that it's totally misogynist. It doesn't matter that the ideology itself is so very sexist. It doesn't matter that,
right.
again, it harms and is dangerous for girls and women. Like, I can think of liberal or leftist women that I know who, if you said something like this, they would be like angry at
Oh
you or
yeah,
me for saying it.
100%. Yeah, and I don't, I don't, I don't know what the solution is to that, other than we have to wake up the people that can be woken up about it. Um, and they get so mad at me when I read what they say. I think that's a good way to do it, is if you show people instead of tell them. I think that goes a long way, if you can get past the you're cherry picking kinds of things. But I don't know. I don't know what kinds of, the parents that are sending their kids to drag shows and stuff. Like, I think there are some people who are maybe lost causes. I do think that with the growth of the detransition movement, we're starting to see this can be this can be treated. You don't have to be lost to your porn addiction. You can come back from it. I think it would be helpful if there were more men speaking up about this kind of thing. I think we've got such a strong women's movement. I can think of a handful of men who are the type of men that younger men and boys look up to, who are trying to give, a good example of what a man should be, and are talking openly about these problems. I think Jordan Peterson was a good egg. He's, I think, writing books for men. But again, I think if you're the type of young man who's already reading books, you probably have a better prognosis anyway.
Yeah. When I messaged you on X to see if you would come on
Mhm.
my podcast, you didn't respond for a while. And then when you did respond, you said, sorry, I don't check my DMs that much. Honestly, I'm scared to. So tell
Yeah.
me what kinds of DMs you get.
Oh, so when I say I'm scared of them, it's not because of the hate DMs. I turned off
Oh, okay.
my
I assumed
DMs
that it was
for,
because you were getting hate
no, it's
DMs.
because every time I open it, there's like 500 of them, and I just eventually I'm like, I don't have it. I can't. It's overwhelming. I did not expect, I think especially coming into the turf movement, when everyone's voice was being squashed, and I just wanted to throw my little two cents in here and there. I didn't expect to have the growth that my account has had, and I'm still trying to figure out how to deal with that without panicking. So my solution recently has been, I'm just not gonna go anywhere near that tab for a while. But I'm glad I checked it because I saw your message right at the top. So
Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. I get it. Do you get a lot of threats from the transes?
just about every day I get a couple of death threats. I've gotten rape threats and threats to burn my house down, and just now it's kind of, I call it the usual, but it's, yeah, it's a pretty constant barrage of insults and threats, and it's always from the same group, whether it's the handmaidens or the transes themselves.
Yeah. What kinds of things do they say to you?
Here I can actually, I've got my iPad right here. I can pull some of that up for you. I have a folder. So we're going by recent here. Mm. Hey, stupid bitch. Most of them don't have balls. Have you heard of something called surgery, you stupid bitch?
Uh-huh. Nice.
They love to call me a man. A lot of them tell me I look like Gypsy Rose and sound like Gypsy Rose, the girl
Oh,
who had the
okay.
Munchausen's
Because your
mother.
voice
That's
is a
been
bit
their,
squeaky.
yeah,
You
that's been
definitely
their new
don't look
favorite
like her.
thing.
Okay. Interesting, interesting.
You're ugly and bitter. At least pull the trigger if you suck on a shotgun. Then you will do us all a favor. Um, Jump
Nice.
off a, walk into traffic. Let me see. I've got another one
Listen, they're
somewhere
the
here.
marginalized victims. We're
They're
the ones
so
who are
vulnerable
always
and
putting
oppressed.
them in danger. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh, uh-huh.
No, and it's constant. I laugh a lot now, um, but hold on. All right. A lot of you should kill yourself, but here's one. Killing you is morally justified and someone should do it. There's no other answer. I hope someone makes her eat her words real soon. She's legitimately vile, naughty, nauseating. You're an obnoxious little twerf who needs to meet Judgment Day very quickly. I think we've been too patient. We just have to kill you for real. So stuff like that. They're the be kind people,
Good Lord.
I've got hundreds of these, to the
Yeah.
point where I recently did a video where I was like, I'm gonna read my fan mail, and it was all from the day before. So I legitimately could do one of those every day with, their insults and threats. But I
Crazy.
never see women threatening them that way. I know
No.
I've never threatened them that way.
No.
And even when they kill themselves, they blame it on everyone else, instead of maybe they had some problems that were not solved by their hormones and their fake boobs. There's really a very comical lack of self-awareness with these people, and a very narcissistic victim complex that they and it's so male, isn't it? The threats. It's such a man thing to do. Like, women are socialized and more naturally just a little more polite. We don't generally speak like that to one another or to anyone for self-preservation, but they have no such qualms.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the censorship experience been like? Like, how have you managed to last on TikTok? I'm not on TikTok because I hate it, but I hear that people get censored on TikTok all the time, right?
I'm on like my sixth account on TikTok. I get banned every few months, and I just make a new email address and make a new account. Really, I'm not using that as a platform anymore. I'm just using it because it's so easy to make the videos with it, and
Mm.
throw captions or music behind it, and they make it very easy and user friendly to put the images up on the screen, to match with the parts of the video that I needed to match with. But the my recent account has had more traffic than like my last three, because I've been doing these videos where I duet them while they're whining about stuff. I'm very sympathetic. I'm very
Those videos
sympathetic
are so good. They're so
too.
funny. The ones where you're sort of crying along with them as they're
Yeah,
crying about, not being able to change their IDs to say
right,
female. And
right.
what else? Tell us about some of those videos.
Oh man, those are fun. Amy Souza calls them my cry bully videos, which I think that's an accurate way to put it. But crying, saying, do you know what gender dysphoria feels like? It kills you. Do you know what it feels like? It feels like there's a shirt that you can't have. It's like, and you're gonna die, because you can't have that shirt. Oh, oh no, the one that started doing the rounds on Instagram, I've seen other accounts reposting it other places, was a guy, they're all saying, oh, it's just so hard and I'm starting to look less and less like a woman, and I could not keep a straight face. Um, but they're, like you said, crying because their ID accurately reflects their sex, crying because, oh no, if it says that I'm a man, then I can't go to Dubai. It's like, oh, you poor thing. I can't go to Dubai either. Oh man, but
Oh,
they love to turn on their camera and then have these meltdowns without any tears. No tears. I haven't seen a single real tear in a single one of these videos. And then they like to yell at me. You see someone in distress, and your first instinct is to make fun of them. Like at this point, like yes, yes, it is. I think we have to laugh at them. I think that it's been taken so seriously for so long, and people are like, oh, well, we have to figure out what's causing this and what's wrong with them. It's like, do we? Or can we just say no? Can we just say no? We're not doing this anymore. Oh, another one recently was a guy yelling. He wasn't crying. He was screaming because uh, a woman misgendered him, and he said, "Did you not see my rack? Did you not see my boobs?" And it's like, and this is like the manliest looking man I've ever seen in my life. But his boobs,
yeah. No, I think I totally agree with you. It's like, no, we're just not doing it anymore. I don't really care why. And people get like
Right,
mad at me when I say that. And they're like, well, don't you? It's like, what do you need to understand? You're a man. I don't give a
right.
shit. I don't give
The
a
answer
shit
is no.
why you think you're a woman, why you say
Right,
it does not matter at all. You're
right,
just not.
right,
I don't care. I
right.
don't think that gender dysphoria is a real thing. But even if it
No,
is, I don't care. Okay, you have a mental
right.
illness. It's not my problem. Go see a psychiatrist.
I
That's
love
the
you.
end of the conversation. I don't need to have this conversation with you.
I'm right there with you. The answer is no. I don't care and I don't believe you. And the answer is that's it. You're like you said, you're not a woman. I don't care why you think you are.
Yeah. Do you feel kind of like traumatized by everything that you've seen, having to comb through all these Reddit threads and watch all these videos and receive all these messages?
It is so gross, some of it, and I think maybe being a vet tech, and I can do a lot of grossness. I think that has never been an issue for me. I'm not someone who gets queasy. But sometimes my kids, I'll be talking about, oh, there have been a couple times I'd come home like, oh, I had a really good vein today. And, my younger daughter will be like, I'm eating. I've never had that ick reaction to things. I don't know if it's traumatized me so much as it's made me so much warier of all men, because you don't know what kinds of things they're consuming at home. You don't know what they're thinking, or, what they really mean. And there are certainly some very good men out there, and I have a lot of great supporters who are men. I think the movement does tend to attract the best of them and the ones who care. um but that's my biggest takeaway is it's always one of them, like, and we don't know which ones.
Yeah.
So I am not really interested in dating again right now, but when I think about that in the future, I think about, okay, first of all, they'll be like, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I make fun of trannies on the internet. Like that's gonna have to come up at some point. But also, I don't, how do you know what they're into, what kinds of porn they're consuming, because I think it's most of them who
Yeah.
are watching porn, and
Yeah.
so that is, I guess, just something that's always in my mind now.
Yeah, and the funny thing about men's porn consumption and how disgusting and perverted they are is that most women don't really realize it, and I think that that's part like a coping
Right.
mechanism. They don't really want to realize it, and part just that women
Right.
don't they a lot of women really don't realize how different men are than them. Like I think that
Right.
and I think this kind of goes both ways. Like I think men sort of assume that female sexuality is a lot more like male sexuality than it really is,
Right.
and that women assume that their sexuality is a lot more like male sexuality than it actually is. And it's very different. And, not that I think that women should necessarily be privy to every deep, dark, disgusting thought that men have, because I mean, how would
Right.
you go forward? But
Right.
like, I just wish that I guess on both ends, but we're talking about women. I wish that women would sort of be a bit more realistic about what it is, about male sexuality and about the
Right.
fact that so many of them are watching pornography and watching
Yeah.
pornography that's pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
Not
When
all of
I
them. I know men who've stopped watching pornography
Right.
entirely because they've figured out that it's bad for them, bad for society, bad for the
Same
relationship, whatever.
here. Yeah, and I respect them a lot. It's like breaking any other addiction, I'm sure. But I was not someone who consumed pornography at the point where I was like, let's, oh, everybody does this, let's make some, and it wasn't until like I had an account, I was, signed up as a model on their website or whatever, and every time you open that website, it's incest porn, it's, teen girl this, like, stepdaddy that, like, and that's the front page, that's the stuff that every time guys open up these websites, it's either the stuff that's being pushed onto them or the things that are the most popular. And that was horrifying to me. Like I had no idea the level of degeneracy that I guess, the average man is consuming on a daily basis. So that is off-putting, whenever I think about it and I think about, men I don't know. But I think you're absolutely right. I think men often assume women have the same sex drive and the same type of sex drive, and and vice versa. And it's just not true. We're just not the same. And
No,
that's
they assume that
the whole
we're also
point is
perverts
we're
and that we love
different.
pornography and that
Right.
we're, constantly objectifying men in the same way that men objectify women. And it's just not that we love having disgusting casual sex with random strangers that we meet in the
Ugh,
bathroom. It's like,
no,
no, we're not no, we aren't.
it's not
If a
the
woman's doing
same.
that, there's something wrong with her.
Correct. Yeah, a hundred
Mm.
percent.
Or she's trying to emulate men in an effort to, feel empowered or something like that, right?
Right. Yeah. Or she's trying to emulate the male view version of women that she has seen in porn,
Yeah.
Um, the the thing that I have heard from some of the women who have done more research into the women transitioning into men's side is that which I need to look more into, but I was kind of surprised to find out how many of them are also influenced by porn. And it tends to be more like literature porn, they got literotica, or these, what is it? Is it Yuri? I don't know. It's the same kind of thing, but it's, like stories and comics about, a boy polycule and, there's like werewolves involved and things like this. It's kind of the same like cohort of the odd kids,
Nerds,
and right, and like they're
nerds
very
connected to
creative,
perversion.
right? But I was surprised to learn how many of them get into the trans ideology from a similar path. But it is funny, it does manifest in a very female way, right? Like I'm gonna write stories, instead of I'm gonna dress up and beat off. It's, I'm gonna write this romance novel about a trans gay werewolf. But
Interesting, interesting. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It was great to talk with you. I really enjoyed this
yeah,
conversation about disgusting, disturbing things.
Me too. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Okay, great. Oh, tell us, I almost forgot. Tell us
Yeah.
where we can find you online.
Oh, you can find me on X at Mary Cate Delvey, or on Instagram at the same handle, but I'm pretty bad at remembering to update my Instagram. So
So
I would
X.
just go to
Mm,
X. Yeah.
okay. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
Okay,
Bye,
take care.
Megan.
Bye-bye.